reading a room and setting the stage. Y'all, if we could get better at those two things as event leaders, we would see phenomenal jumps in not only our guest engagement, but our confidence as the host of the event. And today, Jessica is going to share some secrets for how. I cannot wait for you to hear this. Inquiring minds want to know, how are entrepreneurs like us daring bravely to build a stage, ditch the sweatpants, and step up to the mic? How do we create our own transformative events so we can get our message out into the world in a bigger way that's not only profitable, but it's actually something we can be proud of? That's the question, and the answers are inside this podcast. My name is Sarah Pfeiffer. Welcome to Green Room Central. Hey, it's Sarah. I have an invitation for you right now. You can join entrepreneurs from across the globe who share a passion for hosting their own events. Become part of the community that inspires and cheers you on over at greenroomcentral.com. Today I brought into Green Room Central Studios Jessica Creane, founder and CEO of I Can't Can Plays, an interactive experience studio dedicated to the exploration of complex subject matter through the lens of play. I Can't Can hosts live and digital play-based events designed to foster intimacy and creativity for individuals and teams rooted in games and storytelling. Jessica, welcome to Green Room Central Studios. Say hello to Lynchpin Nation.
Hello, Lynchpin Nation. It's great to be here.
Oh, thank you for sharing your time with us today. I'm excited because this is an area that I'm super nervous about, because I don't tend to be a person who is naturally playful and fun, and you're gonna help here change my mind on all things play in our lives. And on that note, I want to ask you, what are some common misconceptions about the role of play in our lives?
I think one of the big misconceptions is that play is not for adults. Play is for kids, and then we grow out of it, and we can't play anymore because then we would somehow be letting ourselves down, or it's such a vulnerable act that who can we be playful with? We have to really trust people these days, and we can't just kind of walk up to people like when we were kids and say, "Hi, I'm Jessica, want to play?" It's different now. And so I think there's a misconception around the fact that we can, in fact, ask people to play and engage in play, even as adults. And also that play is always fun. I think folks think if something is hard, it can't possibly be play. But play is an engagement of self. It is an engagement with our environment. And so it is very possible to be having an experience where you are feeling really playful and not necessarily lighthearted. And so I think those things get conflated pretty often. And then also something that you said earlier, I think is a misconception. There's this idea that I am not a playful person that a lot of folks have, or that it is an absolute way of being. And I'm much more playful now than I was as a kid. When I was a kid, I was extremely serious. And so I've really grown into my playfulness. And I think that that's something that we can all do.
Okay, there's so many barriers you just broke down there that we could play as adults. We could invite someone to play. With my kiddo, I notice often just so simple, oh yeah, I'm just going to go up to so-and-so and ask them to play. And it's just very common and happens all the time. But that would not be something I would ever think to do. Miss Practical Sarah here. And then this other boundary of that I have a label on myself, that I'm not a playful person, or that I'm a fun hater. And that I need to remove those labels, because I'm living in a world of absolutes, and that's craziness. And then the other one that you said was that if it's work, it can't be play, and that that's also a misconception. And I think that's huge for me, because I told you, I'm a super practical, very driven person, and so I'm very serious about getting this stuff done. And so sometimes I feel like play kind of interrupts that line of thinking for me.
There's one of my favorite quotes about play comes from a book that I love by James P. Carse called Finite and Infinite Games. And he says, one who must play cannot play. And so I think there is a distinction around consent, for starters, around the fact that like you can have somebody who is you can have two people in a situation and one of them can be playing and one of them might not be playing. And sports, I think, is a really great example of this. We call it game, we call it play, but if your livelihood depends on it, if your identity is attached to it, it's not necessarily going to be play. And I live in Philadelphia. I mean, the Eagles are based here. Like, Philly sports fans are extremely intense, and I would not say always playful. And so, like, I'm a playful reader, and yet I don't think sports are necessarily play. So I think there's a lot of ways in which play manifests in our lives.
So good. So I want to tie this into events a bit here. And as a person who's an expert in play, of all the things to spend your time on, why events? Why are you combining these two worlds?
So I grew up as a theater kid. I'm sure we've got some other nerds out there who are, in the same vein. And I think what theater really taught me was a couple of things. One is the power of a good story. Story changes us, and we can be invited into stories, whether we're the ones playing through them ourselves as actors, or the ones shaping them as a director, or the ones in the audience saying, I see myself in this, or I see my loved ones in this. Stories can be really inviting, and those are events. Theatrical events are experiences. And so I think what theater taught me was that we gather. There's a reason why we gather and come to these places to collectively tell stories, and that can be a powerful and transformative experience. And I think the other is that it is a ritual activity. We come expecting something different than we usually have. And so we find ourselves generally at events much more open to change or open to doing something differently. And a lot of times we even take on a role. Like, I am just a fancier version of me this evening is a role. And so it breaks down some of our, again, these like little traps of identity that we hold ourselves to that could be holding us back, and give us space to be different and to take risks with ourselves, with our personality, with our identity that we don't always have.
I think that's absolutely magical and key, what you said right there, because I see it in myself too. When I attend an event, especially an in-person event, where you can be fully immersed in the experience and the environment is really controlled for you, I do see myself or allow myself to take on a different role, and perhaps a role I wish I had in my life all the time, like someone who claps and jumps up and down or dances or plays a game. I see that. I don't know if I noticed that was a pattern until you just suggested it there. But absolutely, I do think events create this environment where we're willing to step outside of our box. And so you're saying, then why not games in that environment?
Yeah, and the social rules are different. It's easier. I think often it's easier at an event to meet new people because everyone is there with the express purpose of, we all share something in common. We have an interest in X, or we know this person who's the birthday, person, or whatever it is. There's some element of purpose that brought everybody together, and so it's easier to find something to meet each other on a level if we know that we have a commonality.
Oh, so good. So you started by saying that you were a theater kid, and so I want to dive into that a little bit, and I want to kind of explore how you think your theater background helps you as an event host.
Yeah, I think that it has probably above all instilled in me a malleability that I have found to be really essential in leading events, to be able to read the room, essentially, to say, okay, so we're not going to get anything done unless I can meet the group where they're at somehow. And so I think what theater really taught me, particularly improvised theater or immersive theater, which I still do quite a bit of, is every audience is different. Every group is different. And if I walk in thinking that last Saturday's energy is going to be this Saturday's energy, I'm in for a rude awakening. But if I can really be present with this group and take some time to breathe with them and get to know what the actual vibe of the space is, it means that we can grow from there. And it allows us to take, I think, a much bigger bounds in how we transform over the course of an event. And I think it taught me the value, I think, probably of like a tight feedback loop. that the audience is a part of the experience. It's not separate from it. I'm not here to serve them totally. They're not here to serve me. We are co-crafting an experience, and as a leader in that, people are going to probably look to me in some way, or whoever else is leading this event. And so whether I want it to be the case or not, there's a modeling that goes on there. And I think theater really taught me that as well. No matter what, people are going to be looking at you. They're going to be looking to you for something. And so be prepared for that.
Oh, my goodness. So many amazing things you just said there. But I want to get something. I want to pull something specific out of you, because I bet a lot of Linchpin Nation right now is wondering, okay, so how do I read a room? Like, can you give us like a specific tactic that we could use that would help us?
That is a great question, Sarah. I think the thing that comes to mind first is practice, which is a little bit vague and probably dissatisfying. So I'll try and go a little deeper than that. But I do think that it is a practice. You can't like read a room once and get good at it. Like, you will start to notice and pick up on a lot of nuances. So to really have a mastery, and I would not say that I have a mastery, like I am still practicing all the time, and sometimes I get it wrong. But the act of doing it repeatedly tells me like, oh, there's just a little bit of nuance in the vibe of this room, or, oh, there's one person who's angry and they're sitting right up front, and so they're like this. And so everybody around them is like this. And so one of the things that I've also learned from theater is people's heart rates sync up if you're at a live event. And if there's a critic in the room, it is like literally the temperature around that person is lower than it is at other places in the theater. People don't laugh as much because you can sort of sense that there is judgment happening. And so I think you start to pick up on like, what are the pockets of energy going on in the room right now? And one thing that I found really helpful just in terms of relaxing enough to even be able to start reading the room is to find somebody with bright eyes and a good smile and look at them for a minute. And if I need, I'll find anchor points in an audience at a lot of events, or someone who I know I can turn to who is going to either let me know that everything's okay and keep going, don't panic, so that I'm not infusing myself with the energy of the room. And that way I'm not sort of like blocking what is happening. I can stay open to the vibes of the room. It's not really a step-by-step, but I think those things are key.
That's so good. But I think just the permission that you just gave us to know that this is a practice. Reading a room is something that we're gonna be learning that skill over time, and so give ourselves grace as event hosts, as the leader who brought everyone together, to know that you're gonna get better over time, and it's gonna take time. So that in and of itself is super helpful. Yeah.
And the vibe will change. Like you can read a room at one moment, and we're gonna flip a page at some point, and it's gonna be different.
Yeah. No, and I think, if I just like flip through my Rolodex of like snapshots from events that I've been at, I agree. Yeah, I could picture, like you were saying, like, the person who's angry and their shoulders are like tense and they're on the edge of their seat. I can picture that and the energy around that person. Yeah, or you called it the temperature. That's awesome. Now that you're giving us like language for the stuff that we're sensing is happening, I think that helps us, learn, keep on this like practice of reading a room.
Yeah. If I can add one other nuance to that, I think it's that there's nothing wrong with the person who's angry. Sometimes it really isn't. It also isn't. They're not angry. They're just cold. And that's why they're doing this. There's so many reasons that it can be really challenging to be able to read individuals and read a room at large. But that person probably is the person who will benefit most from a little extra eye contact or a little extra something, or it's at least worth the experiment of it. So I think the act of generosity in those moments of just assuming that people are okay, or that maybe they came in angry and they're really excited to not be angry, all of that is possible and important.
Huge there, because I love to say, like, you have to see the humanity in everybody, and we have to go. If someone is kind of expressing themselves in that way, then we have to kind of take a step back and think about, well, what has to be going on internally in their life for them to be showing up in this way, and just kind of be honoring of that. And again, like, see the humanity. Like, we have to as event leaders, respect the fact that while our event is happening, live right now, and this is the most important thing in our lives as the event host, we have to honor and respect the fact that there's like so many other facets to this human and their life that could be going on right now, that like pressures, that internal pressures and external pressures that they're experiencing, and that all of that is coming into the room with them. And not to say that in a way that makes it feel like, oh gosh, it's like, that seems so heavy, but more just like awareness, right? And I love that you're calling it temperature instead of like kind of naming emotions, because temperature almost gives us this hope, which as it should, that we have control over like where it goes. Yeah.
I had an audience member recently for an event that I ran. She was on her way out after the experience, and I had been clocking her over the course of the event. And I was like, I think, yep, everyone looks engaged. Okay, I think we're good. And then as she was leaving, she said goodbye, and then she stopped in the doorway and she turned around and she said, "How do you sleep at night?" Yeah, that was my reaction.
Oh,
I was
my.
like, oh, dear Lord. Oh my God, what did I do wrong? Was my first thought. Like, how dare I charge money for this? Like, what does that mean? And so I half joked it off and was like, well, not very well, actually. Why do you ask? And she ended up writing me. She gave me a quick explanation in the moment and ended up writing me the next day. And turns out it wasn't a critique at all. It was just like, wow, this event hits on heavy stuff. This event sort of asks us all to hold space for each other in a big way, and people get very vulnerable. How do you take all of that in and not be totally crushed by it? And so it took the additional explanation of things for us to really be able to have a conversation about that and say, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a hard thing. Thanks for engaging with me. That's what makes it possible.
Wow.
But it was terrifying in the moment.
Yeah. So you do deal with these really heavy things inside of your events. How do you make that alluring, if you will, like the act of like personal growth inside of an event? Like, how do you make it attractive to potential guests?
I think play is learning. It's a great way to learn. And very often we sort of think of it as respite from learning, or respite from the things that are more serious in our life. And my personal take is that the things that we are the most playful about are often the things that we should be the most playful about are often the things we take most seriously. And in a lot of ways that will inhibit our creativity, because we'll just stay in our strict boxes. And so I think part of my job is to say, creativity is a thing. If you're into creativity, if you want to think differently, if you want to be evolving as a human being, then you're going to have to shake things up a little bit, because it just is, in order to grow, we need space. And if there's no space in our minds or our activities, then there's no room for growth. And so those things have to like really shove their way in. So a lot of what I do is create space. And then a lot of the other half of that is modeling some of the behavior of, this is what it looks like to learn, or this is what it looks like to be playful in this world, and setting a tone where there's no failure, where you're not going to be chastised for anything that doesn't go according to plan, because these are spaces of supportive chaos, and we're sort of aiming for that. And so some of it is modeling a level 10 of what it looks like to take a risk or to engage, so that folks will know that it's okay to be a 4 or a 5. And the other is to, I think, hopefully create games that people want to engage with, and activities that people want to engage with. So sometimes they're seeing me do it first, sometimes they're seeing other people. Very often it's choice-based. I do not think there's ever been a time when I have had an event where someone has to do something, because what do I know? I'm here to support, and like you said, make it alluring. And so a lot of it is to be clear about the rules, like, here's how we're playing, and here are your permissions, and expectations. This is the expectation for the game. Here are some ways you can play with that if that doesn't feel good for you. If that still doesn't feel good for you, hail me down. There are other things that we can do and talk about. And so a lot of it is again, reading the presence of the people there, letting them know what they can do, and then letting them know, for those who are like, that's not enough for me, here's where to start. Here's the first step to do this thing.
Hey, I don't want you to miss out. Did you know that this conversation always continues inside the Lynchpin Nation community? It's a free, modern discussion forum exclusively for Green Room Central listeners that will have a profound impact on the way you look at events in your business. Get answers to your biggest questions, hear behind-the-scenes nuggets from event leaders, and get access to helpful templates, guides, and checklists as you start and scale events in your business. Be part of the daily discussion with entrepreneurs just like you. You can join for free over at greenroomcentral.com. I'll see you inside. It's so important, Lynchpin Nation, that you hear what Jessica just said there about setting expectations. And I think it applies whether it's a game or it's, learning a specific curriculum, a more, traditional way. Without games, it's being very clear on roles in the room. It's being very clear on what they have permission to do and not do. I love that. What's the first step? People, as soon as they arrive into your event, you're creating a community. And the first thing anybody wants to know when they arrive in a new community is, how do I fit in? And so Jessica's modeling here very clearly how to set expectations, and I feel like that's like table stakes number one thing to do when people show up for your thing, and then to reset them as you go, because like let's say you've been teaching for a while and now you're going to go into a game teaching scenario, like that's the perfect opportunity to reset expectations and the rules for how to fit in and play in this game. So love everything that you just said there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people often do too, in order that clarity is vital, and it is also nuanced. And so I think like those of us, we host events, so we get really good at this. But sometimes there will be you'll still hear people say like, and now we're going to do the fun thing. And there's just nothing that makes people feel less fun than telling them they're about to have fun. It just, for so many people, myself included, often I'm like, well, not me, or prove it. Like we get a little bit defensive about it. So saying you are going to feel this way, people tend to shut down with. But saying like, we're going to open up this thing, we're going to explore this thing together, there's space for them to bring themselves to it, where they don't feel like they have to meet a certain emotional layer that is being put on top of them.
Okay. Love that. So on top of all the list of things that we, say in our expectation setting, one of them to not say is, this is how you're going to feel, because that just gets uncomfortable for people. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know how anybody's going to feel. I can tell them what we're going to do. I can tell them the what, I can tell them the why, but I can't tell them how they're going to feel.
Okay. Awesome. So all of this stuff is a lot about intimacy within an event and fostering that. And I want to dive into how games are able to help us foster even more intimacy within an event.
Yeah, games are like events within events. Like you are at an event, you've come for a purpose, and the game says right now there are going to be some additional rules and structures and permissions granted, and possibly even some very specific roles that you get to play. And a lot of what I do is have people play with their own identity. So like, you are not going to be Queen Sarah in this. You're going to be, a version of Sarah that is often confused by how to keep plants alive. And so like, that's going to be a core part of your identity in this. And we're going to explore that together, or whatever it is. I don't know that we've ever done
that. Is often
plants, but
an identity that I take on is like, how do I keep this plant alive? So this is hitting home for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So a lot of it is just exploring facets of ourselves that we don't always get to explore. And I think we are so used to engaging with, there are so many layers to this, right? Like if I'm running a public event, it's how do we contend with strangers, or how do we present ourselves to people who we don't know? When are we performing? When do we break things down? What does it take to do that? How do you build trust? And if I'm working with like smaller groups, I do like coaching with individuals. I also work with teams. all kinds of things. And that's very different because a lot of teams, if they've been working together for quite some time, they know each other in a very specific context, in very specific roles, and with very specific dynamics that have built up over time. The culture's been layered on top. There's already so much going on there. And so play says no to a lot of that. Play says we're going to try something else. And you're going to get to be somebody else. And it is deeply humanizing to see folks take on a role that you haven't seen them take on before. Or to campaign together. I do a lot of role playing and sort of building role playing games with folks, and so you get to just say, okay, I'm gonna be a warrior in this, or I am not usually the one to be at the front lines, and this time I'm gonna just give this thing a shot, and suddenly everybody's rooting for you because you're campaigning together, and it's weird and exciting to see, Jenny from HR wielding a battle axe. And they're not always, I tend to run very pacifist games, actually. But I think it's like a nice touchstone for folks is you can really take on something new and unexpected, and you just end up learning about people and having these kind of fiero moments together where you really get to celebrate your accomplishments in a way that I think gets lost very often among teams, or there is a formal celebration of what we've done, but not necessarily a deep or intimate celebration of the work that it took to get something done and every individual's contribution to making that happen. So I think games create a lot of space for that. And they also create a lot of space for us to think about how we present in the world. A lot of the games that I create and run are philosophy-based. So it's very much like, who are you actually? What are your values? What is it that you find really important to talk about in the world? What is a universal truth to you? And so it opens up a dialogue for these deep questions that we can often feel as teams or as an event, as a group, but we don't have the language for, or we haven't had a chance to really go deep, because why would a team spend their time talking about universal truth if they don't have to? In what world is that relevant? And it ends up being relevant, and we end up surprising ourselves, and that level of surprise is profoundly bonding.
Oh, that's I love that. But I'm such a practical person, and so I kind of want to know, in a virtual setting, how do you, because you typically use board games, right? Like analog board games. Like how have you been making that work?
Yeah, the active translation is one of my favorite things. So I geek out on it, I think, is the short answer. The question of like, can this thing be done, is exciting to me. The first game I ever made came from the question, can I make an infinite tabletop game? Can I make a game that never ends? And so I've definitely been like leaning into the nerdery on that one. I think Zoom has a lot of affordances. One of them is there are some things you just can't do in person, like send a DM and have nobody know that it has happened. If you're passing notes during a board game, everyone's going to know who you're conspiring with. If you're doing this on Zoom, no one's going to know. Or you can send messages to me personally to say like, okay, I want to try this thing, or like, how does this sound? You can check in. You can actually build safety in a lot of ways that you wouldn't be able to in a more public setting. So there are definitely ways to sort of say, okay, what can this thing do that the real world can't do? And how can we use that as a tool, or what we call game mechanics, the actions that players take.
Oh, cool. Instead of what are all the ways this is not going to work? You're like, starting with what are all the cool things that we can do now that we couldn't do before? One of my favorite, I don't know if you think this is cheesy or not, or like small fry game, but one of the favorite things that happens during virtual events for me that feels very safe and playful at the same time is scavenger hunts, because we are all sitting now in like a room with props, and so we can go ask people to, like, as an icebreaker, to go run and grab something and then like talk about it in a breakout room, right? And how fun is that? And that's not possible in a boardroom, per se, right? Like, I would not be able to go grab, like, that piggy bank behind me and bring it up and, like, share the story that it's, like, from childhood and it's Fisher-Price and isn't it fabulous? And they don't make things like this anymore. I don't get to have that conversation because I don't have it, like, I can't, like, show and tell it.
yeah this world we live in is so personal. Mm-hmm. These are prop books. Mm-hmm. Like these are just some of my favorite books. And a lot of it is like, oh yeah, I love talking about books. And so this is ideally a signifier to like, hey, come talk to me about books. I'm down. Yeah, there's so much we can do.
Oh, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about things that you take away from events. I think you and I share a similar love for swag, but not in the sense of like a throwaway pen, but in the sense of something meaningful. And so what are your thoughts on artifacts, swag, talismans that you take, that the guest would take with them after an experiential event?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to do it. And my favorite so far is a takeaway for something that has already been imbued with value over the course of the event. So it's not like coming out of an event and seeing like, oh, cool, water bottles, although water bottles are great, but something that you are using over the course of the experience. So by the time you leave, you don't want to part with it. There's an event that I run right now where people have the choice at the end to essentially keep this artifact that they've been building this connection with and filling with their own secrets and perceptions of them from others over the course of this of the experience, and they have to make a choice at the end about whether they want to keep those things or what it would take, what it would mean to sacrifice them into the void, and what would come from that. And so I think something like that is both attached to people's agency and also is valuable to them at that point is something that is worth holding on to. I think that also things that trigger are, I'm a very associative thinker. And so when I see things around me, I'm immediately transported to the place where I got them or the people that I was with. And so the things that fill me with joy or pride or like, oh, I took a risk the day I got that lip gloss or whatever it is, then I feel that way again. And if I want to be able to trigger that feeling in myself, then artifacts are really helpful for that. And so I think the things that make us really feel something when we look at them are the artifacts that I find myself very interested in.
I couldn't agree more. Love that. So as we wrap up here, I want to go into a lightning round if you're willing, and ask you a few questions just to get your quick answers on each. So the first one is, what do you say to yourself backstage versus on stage?
What a great question. Usually I'm dancing backstage, to be perfectly honest. Like just got to get my body moving. But I think the talk is just like love them. Whoever's out there, just love them. They're worth it. You're worth it. Everybody showed up. And so don't pay lip service to showing up. Really show up.
Hugely powerful. Share your best tip for filling events with Linchpin Nation.
Oh, this is so not a tip. I'm going to say it anyway. Spend time with the people that you want to reach. It's not about everybody. It's not going to be for everybody. And the best way to grow an audience, I think, is having people who are going to do the proselytizing for you because you've done something for them. So what can you do for these people? And then find the ones who are going to be your diehards. Easier said than done, but valuable.
Right. Yeah, it works. What is your favorite moment at events you host?
I think it is probably the moment after an event has ended when I get to find out if it worked. Because usually I can tell, but this is so egotistical. Yeah, I think I like the confirmation that the experiment has worked for some folks, or they'll tell me things that they were thinking, and so it's a way for me to check my own narratives. I think is actually what I really like about it, is to find out like, okay, what was this person thinking, or that person, on that table over there, like I heard her ask some seriously interesting questions, and I'm not actually sure if it was because she was questioning the materials or deeply engaged. And so being able to get those checks sort of helps me to build things for the next time. And so, yeah, that transition space between here's what was and here's what could be is very alive and electric.
Do you use that time to like check in with guests one-on-one personally?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the best thing about hosting your own events?
It's probably similar. It's probably the chance. It's a chance to run an experiment, something that I believe in, something that I am deeply interested in, and it's all interpersonal and interdependent. Like games don't play themselves. And we can play with ourselves, but the best play is with others. And so it's all an experiment. Like how can I learn something? How can I get better at creating spaces that feel playful and transformative for folks? Yeah, it's the unknown. I like the unknown, even though it's scary.
It's very scary, but it's where the best things happen. I'm noticing you're using the word experiment intentionally. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a hard time with absolutes. And so experiments feel very open-ended. It also gives me permission to make mistakes. It gives me permission to set aside some of my perfectionist tendencies. I'd say sometimes I'm just a perfectionist and sometimes I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so an experiment really helps with that. It says, this is one of many. This isn't the event of my life.
Oh, I want everyone to just like underline that one in their notebooks right now. Experiment. This is an experiment. Okay, I would love to know what you're reading right now.
Oh, probably like 6 things. I am reading a book by Ken Liu, it's a novel of his. I can pull it up in a second, but I'll hawk one of his other books for a second. I just finished The Paper Menagerie recently and have been just low-key obsessed with this book. I also just finished Mushroom at the End of the World, which was fascinating to look at the relationship between mushrooms and storytelling and capitalism and people. Fascinating. And I am also reading The Practice of Groundedness right now by Brad Stulberg, which is, I feel seen with that book.
Aw, that's awesome. What have you got going on right now, Jessica, that Lynchpin Nation should know about?
I think what I've got going on right now is some event hosting that I'm doing and looking to do some more of. So I wrapped up a large project in December and am looking to get into a bunch of different kinds of events. And so I'm finding myself with a space for the first time in months to be running more online events for organizations and individuals. And in hopefully the next month, when Omicron dies down, we'll be back to some live performances on New York's Lower East Side at a place called Caveat for an event that I've been running there for about 9 months.
Oh, excellent. And where's your favorite social spot for people to bump into you?
I am probably, it is a social spot, but I'm probably on email the most and Slack. But I can be found on Instagram and Twitter, and I check those things regularly starting in 6 days when my self-imposed social media detox is done.
We all need one of those every once in a while. I will link all those up in the show notes so folks can find you. Jessica, this has been an absolute treat, and I'm so thankful you joined us here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Lynchpin Nation. It's been awesome, and I hope to be able to engage and connect further.
Thank you for listening to the Green Room Central podcast. If you love this episode, then please take a screenshot on your phone and post it to Instagram, and be sure to tag at Sarah Pfeiffer and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear and who you'd like to hear from in the future. That'll help me know what to create for you. And also, if scaling events in your business sounds like something you want to tackle in 2022 and you need a coach, let's connect to see if one-on-one coaching is for you. Just go to thegreenroomcentral.com and you and I can work together one-on-one throughout the course of the year and deep dive into the inner workings of your events and business. You'll receive mentorship, personalized feedback, and customized guidance to define your goals and achieve your next level of success. Go to greenroomcentral.com right now to apply. Now, in case you're curious, this podcast is built on Kajabi. I am absolutely loving how easy it's been to get things set up, but more so, I'm thrilled that my entire business is run within one platform. From my emails, to my pages, to my courses, and now to my podcast. It's all under one roof. If you love simplicity and scalability as much as I do, then I want you to go to greenroomcentral.com right now to get a free 14-day trial from Kajabi, who I am thrilled to say is a sponsor of this podcast. I appreciate your commitment to leveling up and learning the mindset and strategies of live events. I want you to keep going, keep learning. And if you want more, head over to greenroomcentral.com for show notes and all the links from today's episode.